Hey guys, tonight we're going on a journey, not just through time, but through the minds of men who held unimaginable power. We're going to explore the bizarre, the terrifying, and the utterly surreal laws enforced by some of Rome's most infamous emperors. Now, before we begin, let's set the scene, shall we? Dim the lights if you can. Maybe light a candle, or just close your eyes and let the sounds guide you. Perhaps turn on a gentle fan for that soft, distant hum, or listen to the quiet patter of rain outside your window. Let your body relax into your chair or bed. Feel the gentle support beneath you, and let your breathing become slow and even. This is a space for calm, for curiosity, and for a gentle drift into the past. And as you settle in, take a moment, if you feel inclined, to let me know in the comments where you are tuning in from and what time it is for you. It is always wonderful to imagine our little community spanning across different time zones, all sharing this quiet moment. If you enjoy what I do here, a gentle tap on the like button and a subscription would be truly appreciated, but only if it feels right. No pressure at all, just a quiet invitation. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey together, back to a time of empires, marble, and men who believed themselves gods. Our journey begins high above the bustling forum, on the Palatine Hill, within the sprawling, opulent confines of the imperial palace. Imagine, for a moment, that you are standing in one of its vast, echoing marble halls. The air here is different. It is thick, heavy, not just with the scent of expensive incense that constantly wafts from hidden braziers, but with something else. An almost palpable sense of authority, of history, of immense suffocating power. The most striking symbol of this power, the very embodiment of the emperor's divine right to rule, is the Tyrian purple robe. This isn't just any color. It is a statement, a burden, a sacred mantle. You might catch a glimpse of it, perhaps draped over a golden chair in a sun-drenched atrium, or see a flash of its deep, dark hue as a distant figure glides through a shadowed corridor. The silk is so heavy, so rich, that its mere movement creates a soft, almost reverent rustle against the polished marble floors. A whisper, a sigh of luxury and command. This isn't a simple garment. It is woven from the finest silk, imported from distant lands, and dyed with a pigment so rare, so precious, that its cost was astronomical. The dye itself, extracted from thousands upon thousands of murex sea snails, carried a peculiar, almost metallic scent, a briny, slightly pungent aroma that even after countless rinsings clung stubbornly to the fabric here. Deep within the palace, this subtle, organic tang mingles with the sweet woody notes of cedar and myrrh from the burning incense. It creates an olfactory tapestry that is both sacred and strangely primal, a scent that is uniquely imperial. As you stand, perhaps leaning against a cool, smooth marble column, you notice the sounds, or rather, the lack of them. The vastness of the palace absorbs most noise. The wind, when it does stir, whispers through the grand colonnades, a soft, melancholic sigh that seems to carry echoes of forgotten decrees and ancient ambitions. Footsteps are muted, conversations are hushed. Every voice is instinctively lowered, every movement deliberate, as if the very air demands reverence. You can almost feel the weight of countless eyes unseen, observing. The silence here is not empty. It is pregnant with expectation, with unspoken rules, with the silent hum of an empire held in one man's hands. The light filters in through high, arched windows, casting long, dramatic shadows that danced slowly across the mosaic floors. Dust motes, tiny specks of the past, drift lazily in these shafts of light, caught in the slow, heavy air. There is a coolness to the palace, a constant, almost tomb, like temperature maintained by the thick walls and vast spaces. It invites a slow, deliberate pace, a quiet contemplation. This purple robe, this silent palace, it is not just a place, it is a state of being, a permanent stage for the extraordinary, and as we shall see, the utterly absurd. Now, let's step away from the oppressive solemnity of the general palace atmosphere and delve into a very specific corner of imperial eccentricity. Our focus shifts to one of the most infamously bizarre emperors, Caligula, and his most beloved, most revered companion, a horse named Incitatus. Imagine, if you will, the stable, but this is no ordinary stable. It is a structure of breathtaking opulence, a testament to a man who saw no distinction between the divine and the utterly ridiculous. The walls are not rough, hewn wood, but polished marble, cool and smooth to the touch, reflecting the soft glow of oil lamps. The floor is meticulously swept, perhaps even covered with fine sand, cushioning every hoof fall. Incitatus himself, a magnificent creature, stands in a stall that is less a pen and more a private apartment. His manger, from which he eats his carefully prepared oats, is not carved from wood, but from gleaming ivory. Imagine the soft clinking sound as the golden grains tumble into this exquisite trough, a delicate, almost musical whisper in the otherwise profound quiet. He wears blankets of the richest Tyrian purple, just like the emperor's own robes, their heavy silk caressing his powerful back. You can almost feel the luxurious weight of the fabric, the subtle warmth it provides, the faint lingering scent of that precious dye. But the true absurdity, the true measure of Caligula's devotion, extends far beyond the stable walls. For Incitatus, life was a symphony of silence. Caligula, in his boundless affection, decreed that whenever Incitatus was resting, absolute quiet must be maintained in the surrounding streets. Imagine the scene. The bustling Roman thoroughfares, usually alive with the clamor of carts, the shouts of vendors, the endless chatter of citizens, suddenly falling into an enforced hush. Soldiers, their heavy armor subtly clinking with each slow, deliberate step, would patrol the perimeter, ensuring that no sound disturbed the imperial horse's slumber. You might hear the faint, rhythmic creak of their leather sandals on the cobblestones, or the soft, almost imperceptible rustle of their tunics in the breeze. But beyond that, a profound, almost unnatural stillness descends. The air itself seems to hold its breath. You can almost feel the tension in the atmosphere. The vendors, their voices usually boisterous, now communicate in hushed whispers, their movements slow and cautious. Carts are rerouted or their wheels are meticulously padded. The entire neighborhood, perhaps an entire quarter of the city, becomes a zone of enforced tranquility, all for the sake of one magnificent, pampered animal. This isn't merely quiet, it is a controlled, curated silence. A silence that speaks volumes about the emperor's power, his whims, and his complete disregard for the practicalities of governance. It's a silence that is both absurd and, in its own way, deeply calming for us, as we imagine the world holding its breath, waiting for a horse to stir. the gentle chewing of Incitatus on his golden oats, the soft swish of his tail. These are the only sounds truly permitted to break the spell. A senator with 4 legs, indeed, demanding a peace that most humans could only dream of. From the hushed streets surrounding Incitatus's lavish stable, we turn our attention once more to Caligula, and another one of his truly monumental acts of imperial madness, his declaration of war against the sea itself, against the mighty god Poseidon. Picture this afternoon, a day unlike any other in Roman history. Thousands upon thousands of legionaries, the disciplined, fearsome backbone of the Roman Empire, are not marching towards a barbarian frontier, nor are they preparing for a grand parade in the city. Instead, they are arrayed along a vast sandy beach, their polished armor glinting under the Mediterranean sun. The air is thick with the scent of salt and the subtle metallic tang of countless breastplates and helmets. The rhythmic, ceaseless sound of the waves crashing against the shore forms a monotonous, almost hypnotic backdrop. Each wave a soft, sighing rush of foam, then a gentle hiss as it recedes, only to be followed by another and another. It is a sound of infinite repetition, a natural lullaby that is played on these shores for millennia. The legions stand in formation, their standards fluttering gently in the sea breeze. You can hear the subtle, almost imperceptible creak of leather straps, the soft friction of metal on metal as a soldier shifts his weight, the gentle rustle of their wool tunics. But no commands are shouted, no battle cries are raised. There is a strange anticipatory silence among the men, a quiet bewilderment. Then the emperor's command rings out, not for a charge, not for a volley of javelins, but for something far more peculiar. Gather the spoils of war, he demands. And so, these hardened warriors, these conquerors of nations, are ordered to squat, to kneel, to bend their formidable wills to the task of collecting seashells. Imagine the sight, the sound. Thousands of men, their fingers accustomed to gripping swords and shields, now sifting through the wet sand, their hands moving with an unfamiliar delicacy. The faint, scraping sound of their fingernails against the gritty sand, the soft clinking of small shells as they are picked up and dropped into their helmets, or into the folds of their cloaks. It is a symphony of tiny, mundane noises against the grand, unchanging rhythm of the sea. The waves continue their relentless advance and retreat, oblivious to the strange spectacle unfolding on their shores. The soldiers, perhaps with a shared silent sigh of resignation, continue their task, the soft crunch of sand under their sandals as they move, the occasional splash as a rogue wave washes over their boots. The sun warms your skin, the breeze carries the scent of the ocean, and the sound of 1,000 hands sifting, collecting, gathering becomes a strange, almost meditative drone. Each schnell, a tiny iridescent trophy of an imagined victory. A smooth spiral shape, a jagged fragment, a delicate fan. They are placed carefully, almost reverently, into makeshift containers. The emperor's bizarre order transforming a simple beach activity into a surreal military operation. The absurdity of it all is almost overwhelming, yet here, in this recounting, it becomes a gentle, repetitive soundscape, a vast collective act of quiet, bewildered obedience. The ocean sighs, the sand whispers, and the legions gather their strange, silent bounty. The air within Nero's magnificent Domus Aurea, the golden house, was often thick with a strange blend of opulence and obligation. Imagine, if you will, the sheer scale of it. A palace so vast it swallowed entire districts of Rome, rising from the ashes of the great fire like a phoenix forged of gold, ivory, and precious gems. Its walls shimmered with mother of pearl, its ceiling sparkled with frescoes, and in its most celebrated dining room the ceiling itself rotated, mimicking the movement of the heavens, showering guests with perfumed flowers and exotic spices. But beneath this breathtaking grandeur lay a very specific kind of gilded cage, particularly when the emperor decided to grace his subjects with his artistic genius. You find yourself ushered into one of the Domus Aurea's grandest halls, converted into a private theater. The air is heavy, not just with the scent of incense and the faint, sweet perfume of stale wine, but with a palpable sense of anticipation torn, or perhaps apprehension. Heavy velvet curtains, dyed the deepest Tyrian purple, hang at the entrance, muffling the sounds of the outside world, sealing the space in an almost unnatural quiet. The flickering oil lamps cast long, dancing shadows across the frescoed walls, making the painted figures seem to stir and watch. You settle onto a cushioned marble bench, one of many arranged in neat, concentric rows. Around you, senators, wealthy equestrians, and high-ranking courtiers adjust their togas, their faces a careful mask of polite expectation. You know, with a sinking feeling in your chest, that once the performance begins, the doors will be locked. Not just latched, but bolted, sealed, ensuring no one, absolutely no one, can leave. This isn't an invitation to a concert. It is a summons to an endurance test, a mandatory appreciation of imperial artistry. A hush descends deeper than before. Then, from the raised stage, a single clear note rings out from a lyre. It's a simple, plucked sound, clean and resonant in the cavernous hall. Nero himself, adorned in a flowing, embroidered tunic, steps forward, a lyre held delicately in his left arm. He bows, a theatrical flourish, and a scattering of polite applause, carefully measured, ripples through the audience. And then he begins to sing. His voice, to be charitable, is not what one might call melodious. It's earnest, certainly, full of a self-congratulatory passion, but it lacks the effortless grace of a true artist. It strains at the higher notes, wavers on the longer ones, and often veers slightly off key. Yet, in this vast, acoustically vibrant space, every imperfection is amplified. Every wavering note reverberates from the gilded ceilings and the polished marble floors. The lyre plays on, a repetitive, almost hypnotic strumming. Plink, plonk, plink, plonk, plink. Plonk, the melody is simple, often meandering, stretching out for what feels like an eternity. Nero pours his soul into each verse, his eyes closed in what he believes is artistic ecstasy, but which to the audience feels like a prolonged torment. The lyrics, often self-penned odes to his own divinity or the glory of Rome, which, by extension, was also his glory, blend into a monotonous drone. Minutes stretch into an hour stretches into 2. The initial polite smiles on the faces around you begin to falter, replaced by expressions of thinly veiled boredom, then weariness. A senator next to you stifles a yawn, his hand discreetly covering his mouth, eyes darting nervously to ensure no imperial guard has noticed. You feel your own eyelids growing heavy, your head nodding almost imperceptibly. The air, once merely heavy, now feels thick with the collective weight of unspoken fatigue. The rhythmic plucking of the lyre, the slightly off-key timbre of Nero's voice, the echoing reverberations in the grand hall thithing, it all combines into a strange soporific symphony. It is a lullaby born of obligation, a forced descent into a drowsy state, not of peace, but of profound, inescapable tedium. You try to focus on the frescoes on the ceiling, the intricate patterns, anything to keep your mind from succumbing to the overwhelming urge to simply close your eyes. You hear a soft, almost imperceptible rustle from a few rows ahead. Someone has slumped slightly, their head lolling to the side. A faint murmur passes through the audience. Is it genuine exhaustion, or a calculated maneuver? The whispers of people faking illness, even feigning death to be carried out of these interminable performances, are not mere rumors. You imagine the effort involved, the precise moment to let your body go slack, the careful control of breath, the stillness required to convince the vigilant guards that you are no longer conscious, no longer a captive audience member. The lyre continues its relentless plink, plonk. Nero's voice, perhaps gaining a second wind, rises again, filling the hall with another lengthy stanza. The boredom is so profound, so all-encompassing, that it begins to feel like a physical presence, a heavy blanket draped over your senses. Your thoughts become sluggish, your awareness of the present moment fading into a dull, repetitive hum. The sounds of the performance, once distinct, now merge into a single droning wave, washing over you, pulling you deeper into a state of forced, uncomfortable relaxation. The grandeur of the Golden House, the power of the Emperor, the very air you breathe all become part of this prolonged mandatory auditory imprisonment. You are trapped, not by chains, but by an emperor's artistic ego, floating on a sea of his imperfect song, slowly, irrevocably drifting towards a weary and forced slumber. The air in Domitian's palace, particularly in its more private corridors, was not merely quiet. It was a silence woven with suspicion, a stillness that hummed with unseen eyes. Domitian, a man of profound intelligence but even profounder paranoia, lived in perpetual fear of assassination. Every shadow held a potential dagger, every whispered word a conspiracy, and so he devised an architectural solution to his anxieties, transforming parts of his sprawling palace into a labyrinth of reflections. Imagine walking through a long, high-ceilinged gallery, but instead of frescoes or tapestries, the walls are clad floor to ceiling with large, perfectly polished slabs of mica stone. This particular stone, known as lapis specularis, was prized for its translucent, mirror-like qualities. When cut and buffed to an exquisite sheen, it became a living surface capturing and distorting every flicker of light, every subtle movement. As you step into this corridor, the first thing you notice is the cold, brilliant gleam of the polished stone. It reflects everything, the light filtering in from distant windows, the subtle glow of oil lamps, and most unsettlingly, your own image replicated endlessly, stretching into an infinite regression of reflections. Your form appears to multiply, to fragment, to shimmer across the vast surfaces, making it impossible to discern where reality ends and reflection begins. Domitian himself would often pace these corridors, usually alone, especially in the quiet hours of the afternoon or late into the night. You can almost see him now, a solitary figure, his leather sandals making a soft rhythmic thud, thud, thud on the cool marble floor. The sound echoes, not sharply, but softly, almost swallowed by the vastness of the space, yet it seems to come from everywhere at once, bouncing off the reflective walls, creating a disorienting auditory haze. His head would be held still, but his eyes, sharp and restless, would constantly scan the periphery. He wasn't looking directly at the wall behind him. No, he was looking into the wall at the reflections. Every angle offered a new vantage point, a distorted glimpse of what might be lurking in the shadows, what might be approaching from an unseen doorway. A guard, a servant, a senator with ill-intent fluid. They would all be caught, fragmented and shimmering, in the endless dance of the mica. The light itself plays tricks in this hall. A beam of sunlight, entering from a high window, doesn't just illuminate, it explodes, scattering into 1,000 fractured rays, each bouncing off a different surface, creating a dazzling, almost blinding effect. The shadows, too, are transformed. They stretch, twist, and deepen, becoming ambiguous shapes that could be anything or nothing. You find your own gaze constantly shifting, trying to make sense of the visual chaos, your mind struggling to distinguish between what is real and what is merely an illusion. The silence here is profound, almost suffocating. It is not the comfortable silence of a library, but the tense, watchful silence of a predator's lair. The lack of sound combined with the constant, disorienting visual input creates an atmosphere of heightened awareness, a feeling of being perpetually observed, even when no one else is present. You instinctively lower your voice, almost to a whisper, as if fearing that any sound might betray your presence, might draw an unwanted gaze from the emperor's reflected eyes. The air itself feels cool and still, circulating faintly around the polished stone. You might imagine the subtle scent of old marble, of dust motes, dancing in the fractured light of the faint metallic tang of the mica itself. Every breath you take seems louder, every rustle of your clothing amplified in the stillness. This space is a monument to paranoia, a chilling testament to a mind consumed by fear. It forces you into a state of constant vigilance, your senses stretched to their limits. You find yourself walking slower, more deliberately, each step a conscious effort. Your eyes dart from one reflection to another, searching for movement, for a sign, for anything that might break the eerie static tension. The rhythmic thud, thud, thud of Domitian's imaginary sandals echoes in your mind, a metronome of suspicion. The endless, shimmering reflections become a visual mantra, a hypnotic pattern that draws your gaze deeper and deeper into the polished surfaces. You feel a strange sense of detachment, as if you too are becoming part of the reflections, a ghost in the machine of imperial fear. This hall is not designed for relaxation, but for a different kind of quiet fort, a quiet born of chilling stillness, pervasive suspicion, and a disorienting visual dance that slowly, inevitably, lulls your mind into a state of watchful, almost trance-like suspension. You are an observer, observed in a hall of infinite whispers and silent gleaming stone. In the twilight of the Roman Empire, when the weight of its vastness began to press down on its very foundations, there arose an emperor whose self-regard was so immense it sought to reshape reality itself. Commodus, a man more fascinated by gladiatorial combat and his own image than by the burdens of governance, decided that the eternal city, Rome, was simply not grand enough, not personal enough, to bear its ancient name. Imagine the imperial decree, etched in bronze, proclaimed in the Forum, then laboriously copied onto thousands of papyrus scrolls and parchment documents. The city of Rome, the very heart of the world, was to be renamed. From this day forward, it would be known as Colonia Commodiana Fiven, the colony of Commodus. A city that had stood for 1,000 years, bearing a name steeped in myth and conquest, was suddenly reduced to a mere appendage of one man's ego. But Commodus's ambition did not stop there. The very fabric of time itself, the rhythm of the year, also felt the touch of his boundless narcissism. The 12 months, with their ancient names 19 January, February, March, and so on, Thufti, were deemed insufficient. They lacked the proper reverence for the divine Commodus. And so, each month was stripped of its identity and bestowed with one of the emperor's own glorious titles. January became Amazonius, in honor of his Amazonian mistress and his own supposed strength. February, Invictus, the unconquered. March, Felix, the fortunate. April, Pius, the pious. And so it continued, month after month through the entire calendar, each one a new iteration of his self-proclaimed virtues. You can almost hear the quiet, exasperated sighs of the scribes in the imperial chanceries. Imagine their daily task, updating official documents, writing out new calendars, meticulously copying edicts and records. The constant rhythmic scratch of their quills on papyrus and parchment would fill the air. Each stroke would form the familiar, yet now unsettlingly ubiquitous, names of Commodus's titles. Think of the sheer, mind-numbing repetition. Every official letter, every tax record, every legal document, every public notice would now bear these new self-aggrandizing names. The scribe's fingers would ache, not from complex legal phraseology, but from the monotonous act of writing Amazonius, then Invictus, then Felix, over and over again. The ink, thick and dark, would stain their fingers, a permanent reminder of the emperor's boundless vanity. Now, picture a new calendar, hung prominently in a public square or in a private home. Instead of the familiar sequence, you see a strange, almost surreal repetition. Amazonius, Invictus, Felix, Pius, Lucius, Elias, Aurelius, Commodus, Augustus, Herculeus Romanus Exuperatorius. The very months of the year, the markers of seasons and festivals now endlessly reiterated the same person's name and titles. Imagine trying to plan a wedding, schedule a harvest, or simply recall an important date. The festival of Saturn will be held in Invictus, someone might say, or the new moon falls in Felix. The ancient rhythms of life, once anchored by traditional names, were now adrift in a sea of imperial self-praise. The confusion would have been immense, the daily conversations laced with the awkwardness of adjusting to this new, entirely arbitrary system. The soundscape of Rome itself would have subtly shifted. In official proclamations, in the hushed tones of bureaucratic offices, in the very conversations of the citizens, the names of Commodus would have been constantly, relentlessly repeated. It would have created a strange, almost hypnotic background hum, a droning chant of imperial ego. The absurdity of it all, repeated day after day, month after month, would have slowly, inexorably, worn down any initial resistance or disbelief. The rustling of parchment, the scratch of quills, the low murmur of voices grappling with the new calendar 13. All these sounds would blend into a singular, pervasive experience. It is a kind of administrative white noise, a bureaucratic lullaby, where the extreme self-obsession of one man becomes the inescapable, repetitive soundtrack to the lives of millions. Your mind, confronted with such a sustained and arbitrary reordering of reality, might find itself entering a state of weary acceptance, a quiet resignation to the emperor's endless names. The sheer, overwhelming repetition of Commodus, Commodus, Commodus would become a strange, historical drone, a testament to a city that, for a brief, absurd period, became nothing more than a reflection of its emperor's singular, all-consuming name. The air in the imperial dining hall, usually thick with the scent of exotic spices and roasted game, hung heavy with a peculiar silence. Tonight, it was not the rich aroma of a feast that dominated, but the faint, almost imperceptible metallic tang of polished glass. Emperor Elagabalus, a figure of bewildering contradictions, known for his flamboyant attire, and even more flamboyant decrees, had orchestrated yet another spectacle designed not for pleasure, but for profound, unsettling amusement. You, a guest of considerable standing, perhaps a senator or a wealthy merchant, found yourself seated at a long table, polished to a mirror sheen. Before you, arranged with meticulous artistry, lay a banquet fit for the gods. A roasted boar, perfectly sculpted and glistening, seemed to recline on a bed of greens. Platters piled high with grapes, figs, and pomegranates glowed with vibrant jewel-like colors. Delicate pastries, dusted with what appeared to be sugar, sat enticingly on silver trays. And yet, as your hand instinctively reached out, a subtle glint, a stiffness in the form, a complete lack of any discernible aroma beyond the faint, clean scent of the hall itself gave it away. Each dish, every fruit, every morsel of bread, was an exquisite deception. The roasted boar was a masterpiece of blown glass, its surface mimicking the crisp skin, its hollow interior reflecting the candlelight in a mesmerizing, almost liquid dance. The grapes were spheres of polished amethyst and emerald, cool and hard to the touch. The figs, crafted from dark, lustrous wax, held a deceptive weight. The pastries, with their intricate swirls and delicate embellishments, were molded from clay, painted with such skill that the desire to bite into their imagined sweetness was almost overwhelming. A quiet, almost imperceptible murmur rippled through the hall as other guests, one by one, made the same silent, unsettling discovery. A senator, his brow furrowed in confusion, gently tapped a pear with his finger, producing a faint, hollow clink. A matron, her eyes wide with a mixture of amusement and unease, leaned closer to a fish, its scales so perfectly rendered in iridescent ceramic that it seemed poised to swim away. The air filled with these tiny, almost inaudible sounds, the soft brush of a finger against glass, the gentle tap of a fingernail on wax, the careful, almost reverent handling of these inedible masterpieces. Elagabalus, draped in robes of shimmering silk that caught the light like trapped constellations, watched from his elevated dais a faint, knowing smile playing on his lips. His eyes, dark and intelligent, swept across the faces of his guests, savoring their silent consternation, their polite bewilderment. He had engineered a feast for the eyes, a starvation for the stomach, a profound psychological experiment. The unspoken rule of the evening was clear. One must pretend. One must marvel at the artistry, engage in polite conversation about the deliciousness of the dishes, and maintain the illusion of a grand banquet. the clinking of imaginary wine cups, the mimed gestures of carving and serving, the slow, deliberate movements of hands reaching for nothing but air, created a bizarre, synchronized ballet of performative dining. Imagine the effort involved. To sit for hours, surrounded by such tantalizing, yet utterly unattainable beauty. To engage in conversation while your stomach quietly rumbled its protest, while your mind grappled with the sheer absurdity of the situation. The faint scent of the candles, the distant, muffled strains of lyre music from an unseen orchestra, the rustle of silk as a servant glided past, offering an empty, gleaming goblet. Every sensation was a heightened awareness of the absence of the one thing expected at a feast: sustenance. The glass fruit, reflecting the flickering torchlight, seemed to mock with its perfection. The ceramic bread, so firm and unyielding, was a silent testament to the emperor's whimsical cruelty. The waxen meat, so lifelike in its texture and hue, offered no comfort, only an unsettling stillness. It was a feast designed to highlight the emptiness of expectation, to turn the very act of dining into a performance of polite, hungry despair. As the hours wore on, a subtle weariness began to settle over the guests. The forced smiles became a little more strained, the conversations a little more desultory. The clinking of the glass ornaments, initially a curiosity, became a monotonous, almost hypnotic sound in the grand, echoing hall. The beauty of the craftsmanship, once admired, now felt like a gilded cage. You found yourself staring at a perfectly rendered glass grape, its surface cool and smooth, wishing for the simple, juicy reality of a real one, the satisfying burst of sweetness on your tongue. But tonight all that was offered was the illusion of plenty, a silent, shimmering testament to the emperor's boundless, baffling imagination. And so the banquet continued, a symphony of silence and shimmering glass, played out under the watchful, amused gaze of Elagabalus, until the late Roman moon cast long, cool shadows across the marble floor. It was another one of Elagabalus's legendary banquets, held in the opulent halls of his palace, where the very air seemed to shimmer with indulgence and excess. Tonight, however, the emperor had planned a surprise that transcended mere culinary spectacle, turning the very concept of luxury into a tool of sensory overload, a beautiful, fragrant trap. As the guests, arrayed in their finest togas and stolas, reclined on sumptuous couches, enjoying what appeared to be a relatively normal if lavish meal, a subtle shift occurred. High above, concealed within the intricately painted ceiling, mechanisms whirred into silent motion, slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. Tiny vents opened, releasing a soft, almost ethereal shower. It began with a single, delicate rose petal, drifting down like a crimson snowflake, landing softly on a senator's shoulder. Then another and another, a gentle cascade that quickly intensified into a torrent. From every corner of the vast dining hall, from every hidden aperture, a glorious, overwhelming deluge of rose petals began to fall. Imagine the initial gasp of delight, the murmurs of awe and appreciation. The air instantly filled with an intoxicating, almost cloying perfume of 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 roses. Crimson, blush pink, porphyry, and deep magenta petals rained down, transforming the marble floors, the polished tables, the very guests themselves, into a living, breathing tapestry of floral beauty. The soft, continuous rustle of the falling petals was a sound unlike any other. It was a gentle, whispering roar, a ceaseless, velvety murmur that enveloped everything. It began as a delightful novelty, a wondrous spectacle. Guests laughed, reaching out to catch the falling blossoms, burying their hands in the growing drifts on the floor. The tables, laden with dishes, quickly disappeared beneath a fragrant blanket of petals, turning the feast into an archaeological dig. But as the minutes stretched into what felt like an eternity, the beauty began to transform into something else entirely. The shower became a storm, the cascade, a deluge. The petals piled higher and higher, forming soft, fragrant dunes around the couches, rising steadily towards the guests' waists, then their chests. The initial delight gave way to a dawning realization. They were becoming trapped. The sheer volume of petals was immense, their softness paradoxically becoming a suffocating weight. The air, once pleasantly scented, now felt thick and heavy, saturated with the potent, almost narcotic perfume of the roses. Breathing became an effort, each inhale drawing in not just air but tiny fragrant particles, the sweetness turning cloying, then faintly dizzying. You found yourself sinking deeper into the soft, yielding mass. Your legs, then your torso, became encased in the cool, silky embrace of the petals. The rustling sound, once soothing, now felt relentless, a constant, whispering pressure against your ears. The world outside the immediate, rose-filled cocoon began to fade. The faces of other guests, initially visible, became obscured by the rising tide of blossoms, their expressions shifting from amusement to a quiet, bewildered resignation. Movement became almost impossible. To shift your weight was to displace a mountain of petals, only for them to flow back, soft and insistent. Your hands, once free, were now submerged, the individual petals pressing against your skin, 1,000 gentle, insistent touches. The light in the hall, filtered through the thick, colorful canopy, took on a rosy, dreamlike quality, making the entire experience feel strangely surreal, a beautiful nightmare. Elagabalus, observing from above, was said to have reveled in this aesthetic murder. He watched as his guests, initially vibrant and animated, slowly became statues, their forms softened and blurred by the encroaching floral sea. Their voices, if they tried to speak, were muffled by the dense layers of petals, turning words into soft, indistinct whispers. The overwhelming rose scent, initially a symbol of luxury and romance, now became a sensory prison. It filled your nostrils, your throat, clinging to your clothes, your hair, permeating every fiber of your being. It was a scent that would linger for days, a phantom reminder of the night. You were buried alive in a perfumed tomb of petals. There was no panic, no frantic struggle, only a slow, inexorable surrender to the soft, fragrant weight. The warmth of the room, combined with the dense insulation of the petals, created a drowsy, almost hypnotic state. The gentle, continuous rustling became a lullaby, the heavy perfume a tranquilizer. You could feel the soft pressure against your chest, making each breath a conscious effort. Yet there was a strange, almost peaceful serenity in the helplessness. It was a beautiful, terrifying stillness, a luxurious drowning in the very essence of beauty, orchestrated by an emperor who understood that sometimes even the most exquisite pleasures could be wielded as a weapon. And so you remained, a silent, fragrant prisoner, in a sea of roses, until the emperor decided the spectacle had run its course. As the vast Roman Empire, once an unyielding colossus, began to creak and groan under the weight of its own immensity and the relentless pressure of external threats, some emperors found solace, or perhaps distraction, in the most unexpected of places. Honorius, a ruler who would famously confuse the fall of Rome with the death of his pet chicken, exemplified this disconnect with a decree that, while seemingly trivial, spoke volumes about the priorities of a crumbling power. The year is approximately 400 AD. The Goths are at the gates, the Vandals are stirring, and the very foundations of Roman authority are shaking. Yet, within the gilded, often isolated, confines of the imperial court, the pressing matter of the day was not barbarian incursions or economic collapse, but the proper attire of a Roman citizen. Specifically, the insidious threat of trousers. Trousers, or brossing as they were known, were considered the garb of barbarians, the Gauls, the Germans, the very people threatening the empire's borders. For a true Roman, the only acceptable attire was the elegant, flowing toga, a garment of intricate folds and dignified drape, a symbol of civilization itself. Honorius, perhaps seeking to reinforce a fading identity, or simply out of a deep-seated conservatism, decided to make this sartorial preference a matter of imperial law. Imagine the scene in the imperial chambers in Ravenna, the new, marsh-surrounded capital, far from the bustling chaos of Rome. The air, damp and still, would have carried the faint scent of mildew and old parchment. Courtiers, all meticulously draped in their heavy woolen togas, would gather, their voices hushed, their movements slow and deliberate. Honorius, a slight figure, perhaps already preoccupied with the well-being of his beloved poultry, would issue his decree, his voice likely soft, yet carrying the undeniable weight of imperial authority. The law was simple. No one was to wear trousers within the city of Rome. Anyone caught doing so would face severe penalties, potentially even banishment. This was not a minor suggestion. It was a serious legal injunction, enforced with the full, if increasingly strained, power of the Roman state. Consider the everyday implications. A merchant arriving from the colder northern provinces, accustomed to the practical warmth of trousers, would have to shed them at the city gates, perhaps donning a hastily purchased, ill-fitting toga. Soldiers, returning from campaigns where trousers were a practical necessity, would have to revert to the less functional, yet symbolically potent, folds of the toga. The sounds of this era were a strange counterpoint to the impending doom. The soft rustle of linen and wool as citizens navigated the narrow streets, the slow shuffle of sandals on cobblestones. In the imperial court, the only sounds might be the faint scratching of a scribe's quill on papyrus, meticulously recording this bizarre edict, or the low murmur of courtiers debating the precise number of pleats required for a truly respectable toga. The obsession with the toga was almost pathological. It wasn't just a piece of clothing, it was a complex social statement, a garment that required a specific posture, a certain way of walking, to maintain its dignity. To wear a toga was to perform Roman-ness, and Honorius, in his isolated palace, seemed to believe that by enforcing this performance he could somehow halt the tide of barbarism, or at least prevent its visible encroachment into the very heart of the empire. The absurdity of it all is almost palpable. While the Visigoths under Alaric were preparing to sack Rome, while vital provinces were slipping away. The emperor was consumed with the length of a tunic or the cut of a garment. It was a slow, almost hypnotic focus on the superficial, a deliberate turning away from the monumental problems that loomed large outside the palace walls. The texture of the togas themselves would have been a constant presence. The rough weave of the wool, sometimes heavy and scratchy, sometimes finer but always substantial. The careful arrangement of the folds, the effort required to keep them in place. It was a garment that demanded attention, a physical manifestation of the rigid traditional values that Honorius so desperately clung to. The atmosphere in Rome, and indeed within the court, would have been one of weary compliance, punctuated by quiet ridicule from those who recognized the emperor's misplaced priorities. The slow, deliberate pace of life, dictated by such trivial laws, would have created a strange sense of stasis, a feeling of being trapped in an elaborate, meaningless ritual, even as the world outside was hurtling towards profound change. The very air seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the inevitable, while the emperor worried about trousers. And so, as the empire began to fray at its edges, we find Emperor Honorius, not on a battlefield, nor in a grand council of war, but rather in the quiet, damp seclusion of his Ravenna palace. This was a city built on marshlands, a place often shrouded in mists, far from the bustling chaos of Rome itself. Here, Honorius found solace in the most unexpected of companions, his pet chicken, a white, plump hen with bright, curious eyes and a gentle clucking rhythm, a creature he had affectionately named Rome. Imagine the scene: the emperor, a man whose decisions or lack thereof shaped the destiny of millions, kneeling in a sun-dappled courtyard, scattering grains of barley across the polished stone. The gentle patter of the kernels as they hit the ground, the soft, contented cluck-cluck-cluck of his beloved hen as she pecked at her meal. Each tiny, precise tap-tap-tap of her beak against the marble, a small rhythmic sound echoing in the quiet courtyard. You can almost feel the smooth, cool weight of the grains in your palm. Sense the soft, dry rustle as they spill from your fingers. One fateful day, a breathless messenger arrived, his tunic stained with dust from the long journey, his face pale with urgency. He burst into the palace, his voice hoarse with the weight of devastating news. "Rome has perished," he cried out, his words echoing through the cool, silent corridors. Honorius, startled from his peaceful reverie, looked up, a flicker of genuine terror in his eyes. His first immediate thought, his deepest fear, was for his feathered friend. His little white hen, his Rome. Had she been taken by a fox? Had she succumbed to some sudden illness? The very idea of his pet's demise sent a wave of genuine distress through him. He pictured her still form, her bright eyes now dim. The messenger, bewildered by the emperor's reaction, quickly clarified. "No, sire, the city of Rome, the Goths have taken it. It has fallen." A profound sigh of relief escaped Honorius. The city, not his chicken. The city, that distant, noisy place, full of squabbling senators and demanding citizens. That was merely a geopolitical inconvenience. His hen, his precious Rome, was safe. The gentle thump of his heart, which had momentarily quickened with fear, now settled back into its slow, steady beat. You can almost hear the soft scratch of the hen's claws on the stone as she continues her meal, oblivious to the seismic shift in the world outside. The air in the courtyard, heavy with the scent of damp earth and blooming jasmine, remains undisturbed by the news of an empire's humiliation. Outside the palace walls, the vast, crumbling empire groaned under the weight of barbarian invasions, its very foundations shaking. But here, within the emperor's private world, the most pressing concern was the well-being of a small, white chicken. The quiet, almost hypnotic rhythm of the hen's feeding, the subtle shift of her feathers as she moves, creates a small, tranquil bubble, completely detached from the grand, terrifying narrative of history unfolding beyond the palace gates. It's a moment of bizarre, almost dreamlike peace, where the small, personal world outweighs the monumental collapse of an entire civilization. From the detached absurdity of Honorius, we shift to the very grounded, very pungent practicality of Emperor Vespasian. He was a man known for his pragmatism, his earthy wit, and his rather ingenious, if somewhat unsavory, methods of filling the imperial coffers. And few laws were as uniquely Roman or as utterly mundane as his infamous urine tax. In ancient Rome, urine wasn't just waste, it was a valuable commodity. The city's fullers, the launders and dyers of the day, relied heavily on it. Its ammonia content made it an excellent bleaching agent for wool and cloth, capable of making whites whiter and colors brighter. So public latrines throughout the city were equipped with large collection pots, where citizens would relieve themselves, and the fullers would then gather this precious liquid for their businesses. Imagine the bustling, clamorous atmosphere of a Roman laundry. The air, thick and heavy, carries a distinct, sharp, almost acrid scent. The unmistakable scent of ammonia, mingled with damp wool and the faint, earthy aroma of the city. You can picture the enormous terracotta amphorae standing tall, filled to the brim with the collected liquid, their contents sloshing with a soft, viscous sound as they are moved. The fullers, their hands stained, their tunics often damp, work tirelessly, scrubbing coarse wool against rough boards, the rhythmic swish, swish and thump of their labor filling the space. Vespasian, ever the astute businessman, looked at these overflowing pots and saw not merely waste but untapped revenue. He declared that a tax would be levied on the collection and sale of urine. His son, Titus, reportedly found the idea rather distasteful, complaining about the filthy nature of the money. Vespasian, in a classic display of his no-nonsense attitude, famously held a gold coin up to his son's nose and asked, "Does it smell?" Pecunia non olet, 30 money doesn't stink. So the bronze coins, heavy and cool in your palm, began to circulate. The distinct clink, clink, clink of sestertii and denarii as they changed hands, from the fullers to the tax collectors, then into the imperial treasury. These coins, though perhaps once handled by hands stained with the very substance they represented, carried no discernible odor themselves. They were just money, pure and simple, funding roads, legions, and the grand spectacles that kept Rome entertained. You can almost hear the low murmur of transactions, the occasional grunt of a fuller hefting a heavy pot, the soft drip-drip of liquid from a leaky vessel. It's a tapestry of sounds and smells that speaks to the very ground level of Roman life, Sunday practical, perhaps a little crude, but undeniably real. The persistent, almost chemical tang in the air, the constant, low hum of activity, all part of the daily grind, now with an added layer of imperial taxation. This was the empire, not in its glorious marble monuments, but in its raw, unfiltered, and surprisingly lucrative everyday details. A world where even the most basic human function could become a source of imperial wealth, a testament to Vespasian's unwavering fiscal ingenuity. And so, we drift away from the individual eccentricities, the strange laws, and the peculiar habits of emperors, allowing the grand currents of time to wash over them. All the opulent palaces, the peculiar decrees, the suffocating rose petals, the golden houses echoing with unwanted songs they all eventually yield to the slow, relentless erosion of centuries. Close your eyes for a moment, and picture the Palatine Hill now, no longer the vibrant, bustling heart of an empire, but a landscape of hushed ruins. The air here is different. It carries the scent of wild herbs, thyme, and rosemary thuffied, growing defiantly among the fallen stones. A soft, gentle breeze whispers through the broken arches and crumbling walls, a sound far removed from the hurried footsteps of messengers or the clink of imperial coins. Where once the heavy Tyrian purple robes rustled across polished floors, now only the dry grass sighs with a delicate swish, swish, swish against ancient marble. The grand halls where emperors dictated bizarre laws or watched their pet chickens are open to the sky. Patches of sunlight warm the weathered stone, and in the evening, moonlight paints long, cool shadows across the silent remains. You can almost feel the smooth, cool touch of an ancient marble fragment beneath your fingertips, worn soft by countless seasons of rain and sun. The air is still, save for the distant call of a bird, or the rustle of a lizard darting across a sun-baked stone. The sounds of human ambition, of power, of madness, have long since faded, replaced by the quiet, enduring symphony of nature. The laws, once enforced with such strange intensity, are now utterly forgotten, save for their echo in dusty historical texts. No one worries about wearing trousers, or feigning delight at a glass feast, or collecting urine for tax. All that remains are the silent witnesses, the enduring marble, the resilient earth, and the vast, indifferent sky. This profound silence, this deep stillness that now envelops these ancient places, offers a unique kind of peace. It is the tranquility that comes from understanding impermanence, from witnessing how even the grandest, most absolute power eventually dissolves into dust and memory. The weight of the purple robe, the clatter of a horse's hooves in a marble stable, the single-minded focus on a pet chicken 20, all are absorbed back into the earth. Let this gentle quietude settle over you. Feel the cool, eternal presence of the ancient stones. Let the whispers of forgotten empires lull you into a state of deep relaxation. The world outside, with its own demands and complexities, can wait. Here among the silent ruins there is only peace. Allow your breath to deepen, slowing with each gentle inhale and exhale. Feel the quiet rhythm of your own body, a soft, steady beat in the stillness. Imagine yourself drifting effortlessly through these moonlit ruins, bathed in their ancient, calming energy. The marble, cool and smooth, reflects the soft glow of the moon, inviting you into a deeper calm. Let your thoughts, like the echoes of those forgotten emperors, gently fade away. Release any tension you might be holding, allowing it to dissolve into the quiet air around you. The past is a gentle whisper, and the present is a soft embrace. You are safe, You are warm and you are deeply, profoundly at peace. Drift now into that peaceful sleep. Let the cool silence of the marble carry you deeper and deeper into slumber. Good night.